Welcome to The Explainer. In a world that seems like it can't stop talking, we're all kind of led to believe that louder is better. But what if that's not true? What if the quietest people in the room are actually the most powerful? Today, we're unlocking the hidden strengths of the introvert.
Our culture definitely seems to think so. There's even research that shows we rate fast talkers as more competent and more likable. It's wild. But using Susan Cain's amazing book, Quiet, as our guide today, we're going to see why that assumption might be totally and completely wrong.
So where does this bias even come from? Well, it starts with this sort of invisible value system that shapes pretty much everything. Our schools, our jobs, you name it. It's so deeply embedded we don't even realize it's there, running in the background.
Susan Cain gives it a name, the extrovert ideal. It's this unspoken belief, right, that the perfect person, the ideal self, is an alpha, someone who's outgoing, social, and totally comfortable being the center of attention. It's a world that values action over quiet thinking and quick decisions over careful consideration. From the time we're kids in a classroom to adults in a boardroom, the message is clear. To be great is to be bold, and to be happy is to be sociable.
But how did this happen? Was it always this way? Not at all. A cultural historian named Warren Sussman discovered that America went through this massive shift. We moved from what he called a culture of character, where things like honor, discipline, your private self were what mattered, to a culture of personality. Suddenly it was all about being magnetic, charming, and fascinating. It was all about your public image. Think about books like Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. That was a key part of a huge movement that basically rewired the American ideal.
Okay, so the biggest problem with this extrovert ideal is that it spins up these incredibly powerful myths. And the very first myth we need to bust is our idea of what makes a great leader.
Just think for a second about one of the most important figures of the entire 20th century, Rosa Parks. We have this image of her as this huge, powerful force, right? But her power didn't come from a loud, commanding personality. In fact, people who knew her said she was soft-spoken and sweet.
And this quote just hits it perfectly. She was described as timid and shy, but with the courage of a lion. Her obituaries were full of descriptions like radical humility and quiet fortitude. The story of Rosa Parks shows us that real strength doesn't have to roar. Sometimes the quietest possible no is the one that changes the entire world.
And this isn't some historical one-off. Just look at this list of absolute titans from the business world. Bill Gates, Charles Schwab, these are not flashy, charismatic showmen. It's just like the management guru Peter Drucker once pointed out. Some of the most effective leaders he ever met had little or even no charisma. They are living proof that modern leadership is often about substance, not just style.
Now, this bias doesn't just mess with how we see leadership, it also totally distorts how we understand creativity. We have this popular notion that genius just sparks into being during lively group collaborations and brainstorming sessions.
But think about this for a second. One of the most revolutionary inventions of our time, the very first Apple computer, wasn't born in some noisy meeting room. No, it came from the mind of Steve Wozniak, working by himself, often late into the night. And he actually called those solitary hours a pure invention, the biggest high ever.
And what's wild is that Wozniak's experience is completely backed up by science. For decades, research has shown over and over again that group brainstorming, it often fails. And why is that? In a group, you get what's called social loafing, where some people sit back and let others do the work. At the same time, others are afraid of being judged, so they hold back their most creative and out there ideas. Real breakthroughs, the kind Wozniak had, often come from what the psychologist Anders Ericsson calls deliberate practice, that intense, solo focus that lets you tackle a challenge without any distractions.
This deep need for solitude is a secret that creative people have known forever. From Dr. Seuss, who was so reserved he actually dreaded meeting his young fans, to Franz Kafka, who said this incredible thing about needing silence to be able to write. For them, solitude wasn't just a preference, it was a critical ingredient for their creativity.
So, if introversion is this vital for leadership and creativity, where does it come from? Are we just socialized this way, or is it something deeper?
Well, as it turns out, the answer is wired directly into our biology.
The fascinating work of a developmental psychologist, Dr. Jerome Kagan, gives us a huge clue. He took 4-month-old infants and exposed them to new stuff, like popping balloons. The high-reactive babies, the ones who cried and kicked and got all worked up, they tended to grow up to be more cautious, serious, introverted adults. And the low-reactive babies, the ones who just stayed calm and chill, they often grew up to be more confident, extroverted personalities.
Now, this doesn't mean your personality is just locked in from birth. But what it does show, and lots of twin studies have confirmed this, is that our tendency toward introversion is about 40 to 50% heritable. That's a huge chunk. It means that in a very real way, your temperament is something you were born with.
And here is a really, really important misunderstanding to clear up. Those high-reactive babies weren't crying because they were antisocial or didn't like people. They were reacting to all new things, sights, sounds, social encounters, everything. And this tells us that introversion isn't really about disliking people. It's about having a nervous system that's just more sensitive to all kinds of stimulation.
So, if you're an introvert, or maybe you lead one, or love one, how are you supposed to thrive in a world that constantly rewards extroversion? Do you just have to fake it all the time? Well, the answer is way more nuanced and, frankly, a lot more empowering than that.
Professor Brian Little has this brilliant solution he calls free trait theory. The idea is actually pretty simple. We all have these fixed traits, like being an introvert. But, and this is the game-changing part, we can act out of character for the things that truly deeply matter to us. He calls these our core personal projects.
So here's the 3-step playbook for how to use this. First, you have to identify what those core projects are for you. What work? What causes? Which people do you care about so much? Second, you have to be willing to act like an extrovert in service of that passion. Push your boundaries for it. But the third step is maybe the most important of all. You must create what Little calls restorative niches. You have to schedule quiet time by yourself to recharge and get back to being you.
And I mean it. This part is completely non-negotiable. If you don't have these restorative niches, whether it's taking a quiet walk or just finding an empty room for 10 minutes, constantly acting out of character is a surefire way to burn out. These aren't a luxury. They are absolutely essential for your well-being.
And really, that's the big takeaway. The goal isn't to try and force an introvert to magically become an extrovert. No. The goal is to build a smart strategy, to know when to push yourself and when to pull back and honor your true nature. It's how you can be both authentic to who you are and incredibly effective in the world.
And that leaves us all with one final big question. You see, this isn't just about empowering introverts. It's about rebalancing our entire culture. The world definitely needs bold action, no doubt about it, but it also desperately needs deep contemplation. So in our mad rush for the first one, what are we losing by drowning out the second? When we learn to value both the talkers and the thinkers, the bold and the reserved, we don't just get better leaders and more creativity, we build a wiser, more thoughtful, and ultimately a more successful world for every single one of us.